childhood movies, what sort of shaped their movie going experience, their interest in films, all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, we're going to dive into a few films that are from my childhood and which have sort of shaped my movie collecting, the genres that I love. So, we're going to get into that today on the video. So, welcome back to the channel. So, yeah, I've got some films here next to me which yeah, we're just going to sort of have a bit of a chat about, and these are the films that I sort of grew up with and that have shaped my collecting interest in films. So let's start with probably one of the most famous films of all time, Star Wars A New Hope. So yeah, I can remember going to see this at the Odeon, Leicester Square, 1977. I would have been 5 years old, nearly 6 when this came out, and this was absolutely amazing. As a child, seeing this on the big screen, wow, it was like a dream come true. Absolutely mesmerised watching this in the theatre, and you know, my love for this film and its sort of sequels, you know, it still stands the test of time to this day. Now, this particular edition does actually contain the original theatrical cut before George Lucas started to tinker away with all of these films. You know, yeah, they're the original ones, which, yeah, I'd have seen this at the cinema, and whilst, okay, maybe it's not as impressive as some as the sort of more modern digital effects and things that we get in films today, you know, there was a certain wonder with this film. We'd never seen anything like this before, and yeah, this really was a big part of my childhood. And then following on from that, The Empire Strikes Back. So this is the film that I've only ever been to see a film more than once at the cinema, and this one I actually went to see 3 times. Again, absolutely fantastic. Possibly top the first one because of that sort of reveal at the end that Darth Vader was indeed Luke Skywalker's father. You know, we'd never sort of seen that before, knew nothing about this, and yeah, it was just like a gobsmacking moment. And this film was a lot darker than the first film. I'd also, by the time this had come out, I'd already got some of the action figures that had come with the first film, that original wave of the first figures that you could buy. I did have some of them. I've actually sold those now. I remember having Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, R2-D2, C3PO, and a Stormtrooper. Never had Han Solo. I always had the Han Solo from The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, I had Chewbacca as well. But yeah, this film, again, wonderful film. As I say, you know, my experience of going to the cinema 3 times because we were just absolutely sort of blown away with how good this film was. And yeah, never ever gone to the cinema more than once apart from this film. And then following on from that was obviously The Return of the Jedi. Now, strangely enough, I never actually went to see this at the cinema. I can remember watching this on a home video rental release. And back then, we used to have a television which was like 16-inch portable TV. That's all that we had. You know, you didn't have these sort of huge TVs that we do have now. No. It was a sort of, we had quite a small television. And I can remember watching this. I think my dad had got it on a rental And again, it was absolutely amazing to watch. You know, sort of the final part of this original trilogy. So again, yeah, absolutely fantastic film from my childhood. Okay, so moving on to another film from my childhood, which again pretty much cemented my love of superhero films, and we're talking about Superman the movie. Yeah, again, I can remember. I don't know whether I actually went to the cinema to see this one or whether it was just on home rental, but I do have a really good memory of buying bubblegum cards, which you collected them, and I can remember you could collect them, and on the back of the card, it was like a character card, and on the back you could kind of make up the picture of the S. I think it might have been this image here, um, and that was like before the days of internet. Um, you know, you only got sort of, well, movie news kind of was just in magazines really, and didn't have a lot of money sort of back when this was first coming out. And I can just remember going to a local newsagent and just being able to afford with my pocket money um, the bubblegum cards. I did buy a few comics as well, Superman comics, but that was more sort of the comic book side of things. But yeah, when I eventually saw this, I think I must have first seen this on a VHS rental. Again, didn't have a lot of money back then, so going to the cinema was a real treat. Um, but yeah, I may have gone to the cinema to see this, but I don't know. I just don't have that memory of going to the cinema. But again, wonderful film. This, from, you know, starring Christopher Reeve. It was the film that cemented for me my love of superheroes. My favourite superhero character of all time, Batman being second, and Spider-Man being number three. Yeah, I absolutely love this film. Still love it to today. Still is my favourite Superman film of all time. With Man of Steel coming in at number two, and then Superman 2 with Christopher Reeve coming in at number three. And if you haven't seen, there's a ranking video on my Superman films, so go and check that out if you're interested. So continuing on, um, Indiana Jones. Primarily the first film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Again, my earliest memories of watching this were again on VHS tape, and absolutely being blown away with this character and the sort of the Ark of the Covenant, all being set in Egypt. You know, all the sort of tombs that they unveiled, and all the sort of magical and mystical side of it. You had the bit at the beginning with the Amazon, and being a young child at that time, again, it's just everyone's sort of dream of sort of, wow, this adventure. It's, you know, sort of a great character, Indiana Jones. You really felt like you wanted to be this character. You know, you sort of, well, back then we used to sort of just use your imagination when playing, sort of in a garden. You'd think of all of these scenarios in your head, and I can remember sort of playing, sort of thinking I was Indiana Jones with a whip, sort of like, you know, trying to make up like different sort of, I don't know, paths for sort of adventure, and like trying to cross with snakes and volcanoes and all of this sort of stuff, you know, all sort of using your imagination, which you know, is so important, I think, in childhood. um so yeah, we used to do that because that was before computer games and all the rest of it, you know. So you do had to use your imagination, but yeah, I can just remember watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and being absolutely blown away by this film. We then had the Temple of Doom, which came along a bit, sort of a few years later. Wasn't as fussed with that film. I know it was a bit darker. It didn't feel quite the same film to me. Whilst it obviously had Harrison Ford returning as Indiana Jones, it just had a slightly different feel about it. And then obviously we got The Last Crusade, which was a real return to form. Obviously, you had the wonderful chemistry between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, and it was back in that sort of World War II sort of era. I know sort of Temple of Doom was probably around that time, but it was kind of obviously a lot of it was set in India, so you didn't really have that sort of connection with sort of the World War II stuff going on. So yeah, those are three original films for me, very much part of my childhood, and again remain today as a fantastic trilogy of films. Next up is a Steven Spielberg classic, and it is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This was probably one of my favourite Steven Spielberg films. Jaws again, fantastic, but I had more memories of watching Close Encounters than I did Jaws. Um, I always sort of found the sort of idea of sort of UFOs and that quite sort of an interesting subject. Um, and yeah, this was brought to the big screen. Um, it was amazing. The effects and the storytelling behind it, and again, sort of a wonderful science fiction film from the late 70s. Okay, so the last two films are a part of a franchise, and again, a franchise that I absolutely adore, and we're talking about James Bond. So the first one being Moonraker. Again, I can remember going to the cinema to be seeing this, and again, this was around the sort of same time as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars. They kind of jumped on the bandwagon of science fiction films around this time, and they decided to put Roger Moore into space. Now, I know for a lot of people, this film was a bit of a step too far. It was a bit silly, a bit daft. But I loved it as a child. I loved the globe trotting around the world. You got to see all these wonderful places that he visited. And then the sort of the climax of the film was obviously going up against Drax, who was the sort of arch nemesis trying to take over the world, and all the rest of it with the space station and that. And yeah, okay, it's all a bit daft, isn't it? But when you're sort of I've been sort of 7 or 8 by that time. Watching this was just like, wow, this is amazing. And this was my sort of earliest memory of getting into James Bond and thinking, oh, I love this character, and it's continued to this day. And then following on from that, even though actually this film came before Moonraker, I think I discovered this film after Moonraker, again on VHS back in the day, and that was The Spy Who Loved Me. But obviously this came just before that film. Again, had Jaws in it, who then starred in Moonraker. But I can remember actually sort of having the car at the time. Well, it would have been around the time that the film came out. Um, whether I saw this first, I don't know. I've got a feeling that I kind of watched this film later, but maybe my memory's a bit hazy here, and maybe it was before. But I do remember loving this car and thinking this is such a great James Bond car, and it is still to this day. The Lotus Esprit turns into the submarine. Again, it was a toy that kids wanted to sort of have. I can remember sort of one birthday actually sort of expecting to get this toy, and my grandmother at the time didn't get it, and I think she got me something like a pair of swimming goggles or something like that, and all I can remember was getting really upset at sort of the disappointment that I didn't get the James Bond car, and apparently that was quickly rectified. They sort of went back. I think she changed. I think it might have been the same shop. I think it was WH Smith's, or Woolworths, one of the two. And anyway, yeah, I did sort of finally get the Lotus Esprit, and again, what a wonderful car. This was probably one of my favourite Roger Moore films growing up, along with Moonraker. Since then, my love for it is sort of not as good as it once was. I think there are other Roger Moore films that I actually prefer, Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun. But this is still highly regarded sort of as one of my favourites, you know, of the films, especially because of that Lotus Esprit. Yeah, just fantastic. So there we go. Just a selection of films from my childhood. As I say, I know other people are doing this, and it was Movie Mad, James over at Movie Mad, that sort of inspired me to do this video. I watched his video, and yeah, he had a lot of the Star Trek films in there as well, which I think I was a little bit older when they came out. I do remember Star Trek the motion picture. Again, I probably could have put that in here actually, because again, that was around the same sort of time. And again, probably one of my favourite Star Trek films of all time. Although Wrath of Khan, again, both of those films for me, absolutely fantastic. And, you know, the Voyage Home, Shirts for Spock, you know, not so much The Final Frontier, although that's got good aspects to it. But yeah, the first two films, again, very much part of my childhood. Although I guess I was sort of getting into my sort of 10, 12, approaching sort of teenage times. So yeah, these films I've shown here are kind of when I was sort of under 10. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts down below. What were your childhood favourite films? And yeah, let's have a conversation down below.